What is peak tiki?
Or what is peak tiki?
Or more importantly, did you come up with this term? I think you did.
Well, in December, so back when you were drinking, so we were drinking heavily at the time.
Yes.
We were philosophizing, and I did use the term peak tiki. Whether I coined the term or not, I don't know, or I
think
got
you
it
did.
from somewhere else. And my thinking was, coming out of COVID, you and I thought that might be the death knell for commercial bars. We knew
I totally thought it was.
Yeah, and we talked about this because you were on my pod during COVID.
Yeah.
And we knew home bars would thrive, and they have during and after COVID. But would commercial bars be on the decline? And they have not.
I honestly thought it was. I thought with COVID, well, we were talking about the hypothetical question is like, what is the fourth wave of tiki? Technically, we're in the third wave of tiki now, and it's like, well, if there's going to be a fourth wave of tiki, what is that going to be, and what's that going to look like? And I honestly thought that the fourth wave is going to be the shift towards tiki going underground and into people's homes. And then we ended up talking about how there's a lot of new tiki bars starting to open up that aren't necessarily like tiki, like classic tiki, but now different elements are starting to be included.
Well, but also the newer classic tiki bars are also opening up. You just pick the Bay Area, and you got this triangle north and northeast of San Francisco. So you got Wilfred's, you got Capu, you've got Tom's, right? So you've got this triangle of bars, and they all, in their own way, Wilfred's a little less so, replicate the classic bars, but in sort of modern style and their own unique spin on it. So can we have too much of a good thing? Given that we were half right in COVID that home bars would thrive, and we were half wrong in that commercial bars wouldn't. I was saying, are we at a peak? Are we at this golden age that... and the problem with me is I'm a glass half full kind of guy. Are we at a stage where there's too much of a good thing going on, and all things go in waves and fads, especially as we know tiki historically? And are we at a peak and on a downward trend?
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the good news is the craft cocktail movement has kept... Many of the new commercial bars are producing excellent drinks, either classics or their own, or in most cases a mix of the two. So for the most part, the drinks haven't evolved.
No, they evolved, and I'll be honest with you, because I remember a time back when I got into tiki, which was like 2006, 2007, was like, they weren't good.
Yeah.
They got you drunk, and that's why they were good.
Yeah.
It was just booze, and it was like rum and pineapple juice and grenadine or whatever. A Mai Tai didn't mean a 44 necessarily. A zombie didn't necessarily mean a 34 zombie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like the dark ages of as far as like tiki drinks it was. And it wasn't until, I would say, from my tiki journey, it's probably like 2012-ish until I started going to where I went to a tiki bar, like, oh, wow, this drink's actually good. I mean, ironically for me, that was the tiki tea. Because I had the raise mistake, and I'm like, oh, this drink is awesome. This is actually a tasty drink. I mean,
interestingly enough,
and it's not a craft cocktail
no.
But to put things in perspective, I go to the tiki tea, and it's like, oh, this is actually a good tasting drink. That's how bad a lot of tiki drinks were.
Yeah.
But you went because it was the ambiance.
Yeah,
it was the full environment.
And the new bars, for the most part, keep the ambiance. There's a couple bars, I won't name them, where I've had a less than stellar experience because they play loud music, techno music, where you can't talk, you can't converse, you can't socialize. And they're appealing only to a young crowd and not a mixed crowd.
Yeah.
But those bars will either survive but in the tiki community won't
They
flock
probably
to them,
won't, actually.
or they are die off. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I've seen from my from what I've seen, it's like usually the tiki bars that try to cater to everybody fail,
yeah.
but the ones that are like giving you the full experience are the ones that thrive.
Yeah, and people, enough non-tiki people are, I hope, filling up bars, quality bars, and not afraid to pay $16 or more for a drink, because the price point is pretty high, especially with the inflation these days, and the restaurant business and bar business have to raise their prices, which parenthetically I think is a good thing, but most people don't. But anyway, putting that aside, so people are still willing to pay top dollar for a top drink and a top experience. But I wonder how long a good thing will last, how many more bars will pile in, and because the tiki community as a whole is not enough to keep these bars in business. People, communities, or tourists or whatever, locals need to go to these bars to keep them alive. I mean,
Yeah.
a bar can't thrive on a niche community. I mean, we come time and time again to the same bars, and we give them feedback, et cetera, but we don't keep them alive by ourselves because it's not a big enough community.
I would always love to do it. It's something I'd always would love to do is like to go to a tiki bar and actually just go up to people, random people, and be like, so what is it about this bar that you like? Like, what brings you in here?
Huell Hauser. Do a Huell Hauser. Take a microphone, a camera, and hi, what are you doing here?
That's amazing. What's the gorilla for? That's not tiki.
Well,
I've watched that scene a million times.
the whole idea is, is this a golden age? Or is everyone piling into these bars? And will it survive in the next 1 to 5 years? No one can predict the future, and we go through fads, we go through phases. Not all good things will not last. On the other hand,
well, I think we can predict the future of tiki because I think we're seeing it right now.
okay,
And I think that is this idea of like, well, you have classic tiki.
yeah,
But now we are starting to see other variations and turns and takes on tiki.
and that's where
And focusing on different aspects. Like, for example, like the reality is, like, say, the Smuggler's Cove. Like, everyone says, oh, yeah, Smuggler's Cove Tiki Bar. To me, I always found that bar to be more nautical than tiki.
yeah.
You have, like, Mothership that opened up in San Diego where it's this, like, tiki bar, but it's like a spaceship kind of thing. That's a completely original idea.
And that's not even tiki, but that's okay. I mean,
But the drinks are, the drinks are are cocktails that are tiki-ish or whatever. There's Chopper in Nashville where it's like this robot tiki bar. But Last Rites,
yeah,
where it's like technically that's not a tiki bar.
Nope.
But very adjacent.
well, it's my favorite of the Bay Area immersive bars. No, and I agree with you. I think
Shit, I mean, like Chinese restaurant tiki bars, which I love. Places where they're a Chinese restaurant, but they also have elements of tiki, like the Kowloon and
I hope those survive.
Oh, I wish
those. I
they're
think
all-
are dying off.
They are dying out, and it makes me sad. But the point is I think, you're talking about the fourth wave of tiki. I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see more and more variations and takes on tiki.
Yeah, and I wish
You're still going to get you're still going to have like the places that are going to do like the classic tiki that we love. But I think you're going to see more and more differences on tiki.
Yeah, and I think what the optimistic side, and I've said this before, is I wish we had another phrase for tiki, because you have core tiki bars, you have the tiki adjacent bar, whether Smuggler Cove fits in it, whether Inside Passage in Seattle is tiki or non-tiki, and then you have the immersive bars, the Last Rites, the Mothership, that owe their origins, especially in the craft cocktail movement, to tiki and rum drinks and other craft cocktails, but are really just immersive bars. And that's my philosophy, optimistically, is immersive bars, as evidenced by Disney, and we talked about this in a prior taping.
Yeah.
Is cross generational now.
Yep.
And I think that everybody, whether you're 21 or 61, there are exceptions, but if you're not ashamed to go to an immersive bar, it's not just for the kids or the young people or the certain generations, or like Tiki in the 60s was what, or 70s in my case, was what my parents did when they went to the Islander in Stockton for an adult.
Well, speaking of the 60s, I have to give credit to our friend Jamie. I was doing a Tiki Golf Club episode with her, and the topic was about like the evolution of goth was actually what we're talking about. And then she brought up the point about the evolution of rock and roll. She's like, Elvis is rock and roll. But so is the Rolling Stones. So is AC/DC. So is like the Velvet Underground. And the thing is, and you're like, even though they're all different, in fact, there might not much be in common with them, but they're all rock. And I think the term Tiki is going to stay Tiki. But I think Tiki is going to mean a wider range of things than just the classic Tiki. And I think it's already happening.
It already does.
It's going to be a Tiki bar, but is it going to be like a Don Beachcomber? Not necessarily. I think Tiki is going to be more of a term that's more wider based.
And it's already become that, much to the chagrin of some people who want to help define a Tiki bar to its origin.
It reminds me of Tiki mugs, right? As like I'm looking at your Tiki mug collection that's on your wall. It's like, there's Tiki mugs where the image is Tiki. Even on your wall, there's Tikis that aren't Tikis. But the Tiki bar, a Tiki mug, like the Star Wars Tiki mugs.
Yeah.
Like Darth Vader isn't. There's
or
nothing
the
Tiki about
Tiki,
or
my obsession with monkeys.
So what do you call them? Like a friend of mine, like I just got my friends Tina and Grant gave me the Misfits Tiki mug where it's the Fiend. It's not Tiki.
No.
What else are you going to call it?
So
Tiki mug.
Yeah, and like I say, for better and for worse, we call Tiki core Tiki adjacent.
Yeah.
And then nautical and traders, or pre-Tiki, and then we get into non-Tiki bars, but we call them Tiki bars, and like I say, to the chagrin of many people. I wish we had a phrase that was in common use, like an E&I or we need something. And the reason I use E&I is because the two fundamental elements of a Tiki bar, but also these Tiki adjacents bar, is escapism and immersion. Mm-hmm. Those are the two. If you don't have that, then you're out of the ballpark completely.
I agree.
So if you have an immersive and escapism bar, we need a term for what that is. Tiki, of course, would be at the center of that, mm-hmm. And in a Venn diagram, it'd be completely subsumed by that, and you'd have other, whatever. But so that way, we don't offend the people who want Tiki preserved for a core classic style Tiki bar, but we also include this whole. So if we broaden the definition to escapism and immersion, then I think we are both in a golden wave of Tiki, but also escapism and immersion, and I think both of those together are going to go strong for a while. At least that's my hope.
To answer your question, have we reached peak Tiki yet? In your opinion?
Yes and no. Yes, and I think that by and large, for classic, what we call Tiki, or the immediate Tiki adjacent, Bamboo Ben and Notch and others are still going strong building these bars. But we're kind of, and they're all great, but we're kind of reaching the point where I just don't know that one can open up every month and will be sustainable forever and ever. On the other hand, when we broaden the description of these immersive bars, at least on the West Coast, I can't really speak for anywhere else, they seem to be doing well by and large and successful. What's interesting is it may be geographically specific, where a place like Southern California, one of two things could happen. Some bars will survive and others will be weeded out, or they will continue to grow and stay strong because it's such a big geographic area for a long time. Don't know which way that's going to cut, and then maybe that's where the future goes. But what's interesting is I can only speak for the West Coast because, those are the bars that I frequent the most, and that at least Thursday through Saturday nights, where some bars, a lot of bars are only limited to those nights being open. Most of the bars that we like on the West Coast, all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia down to San Diego, seem to be doing quite well. They all seem to be doing strong. The ones that we like and we frequent and that the Tiki community frequents. Whether that's true in the rest of the United States, I couldn't tell you. Maybe you have an opinion on that. How well more and more bars are opening up, I guess, outside of the West Coast, which is a good thing. But are they going to be long for this world or not? Whether Tiki Cat, which was a victim of a lease issue with their parent restaurant, which I understand was wildly successful, and you love that place, as I or Tiki Underground, which had to move, but it looks, their new build at least looks like it's great. Better, yeah, terrific. So will those pick up as well? Are we talking about a regional phenomena going forward, or will it continue to be a national phenomena?
Well, I'm going to answer your question.
Well, you know the answer, because I don't.
Well, I have my answer. It's
okay.
Not the answer, but in my opinion, yes, we have reached peak. We have reached peak Tiki, and I think that would have been around 2017, 2018. To me, the Smuggler's Code book. I think that is a great snapshot of Tiki. As we know it, at its peak and at its prime. Now, not to bring this back to rock and roll again, but I was actually watching a documentary about punk rock, and a lot of all the early punk bands, like the ones that started it, like in the 70s, there was this tie to rock and roll music. You can hear it in like the Sex Pistols, the riffing, the Ramones. It's like rock and roll. But then when you go into the 80s, now you start having this hardcore punk thing coming out, like the Dead Kennedys, the Circle Jerks, Black Flag, where it's just aggression and loud. It's still punk rock, but that rock and roll element, in a traditional sense, is gone. I think we've reached peak Tiki as we know it.
In the classic punk
sense. In the classic punk sense.
Okay. I'm trying to go with you here.
I mean, I'm going to say this. I mean, this is my opinion, and my opinion, you could take it whatever. I think we are starting the fourth wave of Tiki. I think we're in it.
The thrash metal phase?
The thrash metal phase. I think the third wave of Tiki, if you're talking about a wave, COVID, things went underground during COVID. We got 2 years. After COVID, all these new bars are opening up. I think you're going to see a lot of new Tiki bars.
In the broader sense.
But it's going to be more immersion. People are going to have new ideas to it. And I think it's going to grow. But I think Tiki, as we know it in the classic Polynesian pop sense, has reached its peak.
But you think it's still going to hang around? The bars are still there. Yeah. We all still love them.
Yeah, I just think Tiki, as we know it, is going to evolve and change
into what I call the adjacent.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, I think that's going to happen, and it is happening. Think about Tiki Oasis. Think about Tiki Oasis. You know how there's like themes to Tiki Oasis?
Sure.
Like one was like spy, one was like 80s. There's always like a theme. Munsters was one.
Okay.
Well, at the beginning, it was just the theme is tiki.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, let's like give it a different theme. And that's true of like any kind of other tiki thing. Tiki. The future of tiki is tiki, but with other things added to it.
Yeah. And no,
I'm not saying that like I'm saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what I'm seeing.
And I think that's right. I don't think I'm disappointed by that. I was just trying to think of whether I could poke holes in that or that reflects my philosophy. And again, if we could come up with a new term, the E&I, escapism as an emergent bar, or this, I think they're going to be around for a while because I think it's cross-generational. I think that technology enables more commercial bars and certainly home bars to continue to make things. People want...
Did you just say escapism?
I probably did. So maybe the drinks are kicking in. Good. Escapism.
Oh, that's the escapism bar.
Ba-da-da-da-bum-bum.
Want to support the Tiki with Ray show and look cool doing it at the same time? Then head over to tikiwithray.com and buy yourself a Tiki with Ray shirt. They're only $20. Tony Canepa did the design and they're screen printed in America.